Hey folks, Zach Osterman, I'm Insider Indianapolis Star with your Friday rundown, talking primarily about three things I'll be watching this weekend in Indiana's game against Akron. First, a shameless plug for everything that we have produced so far, with obviously more to come out of IU's Basketball Media Day on Wednesday. At indystar.com/sports, you'll find my insider. You'll find Zion Brown's takeaways, some really good stuff from Chloe Peterson on the women's team, which obviously also brings really big expectations into the season. Expected to be one of the favorites in an always difficult Big Ten. Mike Nizilik over at HeraldTimesOnline.com's got a ton of stuff from there as well. And as you would expect, we'll have plenty more to talk about basketball very soon, but wanted to focus on football this week in the Hoosiers with their last non-conference game. It's Akron at home Saturday night. As I'm sure many of you have probably seen, Indiana's going to be wearing the black Adidas uniforms, black with sort of crimson lettering. They're going to wear their normal helmets. It'll be interesting just, I guess, to see what those look like, to see how they're received in real time, because at the risk of foreshadowing without providing too much detail, I wouldn't be shocked if we see some more black alternate uniforms come from Adidas to Indiana in the next few months. We'll see. I don't think anything's set in stone, but wouldn't be stunned if that sort of permeates or bleeds over into some other sports. Fashion dye puns unintended. Three keys for Saturday night against Akron. The first one is obvious: Taven Jackson. Just, it was impressive how quickly he found a comfort level, a rhythm, not just throwing the ball, though 24 of 34 for 299 yards with no picks and a passing touchdown is really good in your first start against a Power 5 opponent. First true start, obviously, first sort of, just defined what you would define as a normal start. But also just sort of his comfort level in terms of getting different receivers involved. 9 different receivers targeted, 8 caught at least one pass. The way you could see teammates respond to him when he would kind of bark out orders or he would get on guys between plays, whatever it might be. The energy he brought, the chemistry he seemed to have from a play calling perspective and a rhythm perspective with Walt Bell, Indiana's offensive coordinator. There was just a lot to like in real time. And then certainly if you went back and watched any of the film of that game, he just kind of really grew into that game in some really impressive ways. And so you've got an opponent in Akron here at home that obviously you're going to be favored to beat comfortably. I think Indiana's about a 3-score favorite right now. Last I saw was 17 and a half points. And a team you should beat comfortably. How do you continue to grow your comfort level with Taven Jackson? Normally we would say, for example, in a game like this, that Indiana would probably keep things fairly vanilla offensively. Well, I think you can make an argument that maybe Indiana shouldn't keep it vanilla, that if you have maybe a home game against a team that's clearly a level below you, try some stuff, experiment with some things. Don't be afraid to put some stuff on film, because the trade-off is you get to work it with your quarterback in a slightly more controlled setting than maybe a Big Ten game on the road, or a tough home game against a Wisconsin or a Michigan State or whoever. But just the more you can build Taven Jackson up within that offense, his rhythm, his comfort, his confidence, his chemistry with, certainly his receivers, but even his backs, his offensive line, all those kinds of things. This is your last best chance to really kind of, give him things that maybe he can, sort of smooth some rough edges and almost like make mistakes that maybe aren't going to be as punished as they might be, against Wisconsin or against a Michigan or whomever. So just how does Indiana keep kind of bringing Taven Jackson along within the offense? That's number one. Number two is just the general question of how deep we see Indiana kind of go into its bag with regard to whether it's play calling, whether it's, some of the things that it'll show formationally, fronts it might show on defense, blitz packages, things like that. How vanilla does Indiana want to stay? How vanilla can Indiana stay as a general rule, insofar as, if the game starts to get complicated, if Akron maybe springs a little bit of a surprise on Indiana, does Indiana have to reach deeper into its playbook than it would prefer to, because again, there's sort of a balance. This time of year, on the one hand, sure, there's stuff you want to hold back, not just to not put it on film, but because as a coach, you will have kind of in your mind almost an evolutionary path for your offense or your defense across the course of a season, and you'd be happy to be able to say, well, we didn't really want to pull this out until a matchup in late October where we felt like it was really going to make a big difference. We held it off till then, not necessarily hiding it from everybody, but hiding it from that one, waiting for that one specific instant to pull it out. On the other hand, you've already played 3 games, including Ohio State and Louisville. It's not like, the word's not out on Indiana at this point. So what's the balance you strike between maybe keeping some stuff off film or keeping some stuff in your back pocket, but also, again, not just for Taven Jackson, but for his offense, for his skill players, for, a still growing secondary, for some special teams units, whatever it might be. How much do you try to use this weekend maybe as your last chance to kind of experiment with some things, to try some things, to, put some stuff on guys' plate and see how they respond? Again, in a game where you should be comfortably in control enough that the stakes won't be so high as they would be maybe if it's, that's not as big of a risk as it might be at Maryland, not as big of a risk as it might be at Purdue, whatever it might be. Obviously, you're not keeping stuff off film in the Purdue game, I presume, but you understand my point. Just, what's the balance Indiana wants to strike here? This isn't week 1 or week 2. Like I said, there is substantial film out on you at this point. So is there stuff you want to hold back so that future opponents can't see it? Or is there stuff that maybe you want to try because you want to know how good you are at running it in real time, how good you are running it at game speed against a live opponent, and then maybe giving your team a little bit of that confidence of, hey, this works. We've been tinkering with this in practice or since the spring or whatever. We tried it here. Guess what? It works. We're going to keep expanding that. You can have the confidence that you as a group can do that well. And I'll be interested just to, as much as we can discern, because of course, you're not looking at every single play call and every sheet of the game plan, but as much as we can discern from this game, what's the balance Indiana strikes between maybe not wanting to be too complex, but wanting to use this as sort of a last opportunity to really build itself forward as a team before it gets back into Big Ten play for good. And then the third thing I would say is with a focus on the defense in particular, havoc plays. This defense has been, I would probably characterize it, at least from my vantage point, as good but not great in havoc plays this season. Those are obviously a huge emphasis for Tom Allen. They always have been. Not that they aren't for defensive coordinators all over the country, but Allen really builds this defense around the idea that the way this defense is going to change games is sacks, tackles for loss, forced penalties, forced fumbles, interceptions. In havoc plays, havoc rate is a measure of basically all possible negative plays as a percentage of obviously total snaps or total plays that a defense is able to sort of inflict on an offense. Akron is, frankly, not a good team. Through the first 3 weeks, they lost to Temple. They only beat Morgan State, which is an FCS opponent, by 3 points. Kentucky did struggle a little bit with them for a while. I think it might have been 17-3 at halftime last weekend, but ultimately Kentucky still won the game 35-3. So in the end, it really wasn't that close. And Kentucky's kind of been a little bit uneven itself to start this season unexpectedly. So it's hard to know kind of what of that is Akron and what of that is Kentucky. But the point is, through 3 games, admittedly non-conference games, or primarily non-conference opponents, Akron's offense is last in the MAC in yards per game and points per game, both, if I'm not mistaken. And crucially, not only are the Zips low scoring, they have 7 turnovers, which I think is either second or third most in the MAC to this point in the season. And they've also allowed 13 sacks, which is most in the MAC in terms of sacks allowed. Can we see this defense, which has been really good for long stretches of these first 3 games, as we've discussed, maybe start to develop and seize on the idea of this identity of creating havoc plays, not just being really good on third downs or, stout against the run and making a few plays here and there, but starting to sort of graduate into or evolve into the sort of Tom Allen defenses that we were used to from earlier in his IU tenure, that were just very turnover happy, sack happy, in the backfield, mixing it up, tackles for loss. Again, how creative does Indiana want to get with stuff like blitz packages for this game? How creative does it need to get? We'll see. But this is the kind of opponent where Indiana can feast on that a little bit if it plays well. And again, in the same way that you talk about building Taven Jackson's confidence with some bigger games coming up, provided you can win this one comfortably, you also wonder if maybe you can get that defense to feel like it takes a couple meaningful steps forward from a pretty promising first 3 weeks, the first quarter and a half, 25 minutes or so against Louisville aside, into the remainder of Big Ten play starting at Maryland the weekend after this one. So those are the three things I'll be watching. 7:30, almost certain it's 7:30. Now I'm doubting myself. Saturday night at Memorial Stadium, IU hosts Akron. We will be there. We will have all of the usual coverage before, during, after. So please follow along at indystar.com/sports, at heraldtimesonline.com. Hit like and subscribe on these videos. We would love to have as many people as want to be on this channel able to find it and access it, and come kind of sample what we bring over here as we add more and more of it going through football season and certainly into basketball season. But for now, for the Star, I'm Zach Osterman. Thanks so much for watching. We'll talk to you soon.